Alright guys, here we are back at it in this Black Sabbath album review series that we've been trucking along through the 70s era of, Ozzy being on lead vocals and the same lineup all throughout. And it's the same thing right here, but we are approaching the end of this lineup here. We got the second last album with this original lineup and the second last album in the 70s. Of course, we're talking about the kind of controversial album here, Technical Ecstasy from 1977. And man, really weird album cover. It was, made by Hypnosis, who did a lot of the album covers back then for a lot of bands. They were kind of known for their kind of weird, surrealism type stuff. And this has apparently been described as two robots having sex on an escalator. At least that's how Ozzy described the album cover. So pretty funny stuff. But it is kind of neat looking, and it doesn't really look like a Black Sabbath album cover to me. But despite that, this album, prior to going through this review, going through all these and stuff, I'd only really listened to this album maybe once, twice, maybe three times max. And kind of, one of the tracks off here, which I'll get to, was always one I'd jump back to. But man, I gotta say, this thing's pretty damn underrated. I got a new love for this thing, a new appreciation for it. I always liked it. But I like it a lot more now. Let's just kick it off with Backstreet Kids. That's a pretty damn heavy track with the opener here. And it sounds a lot like, first off, the production sounds quite a bit different. Like, it's not, the guitar tone, too, of Ayami is less dark and less muddy, kind of like on some of the previous albums. Like, it doesn't sound, you're not going to get any sounds of riffs or anything that sound like Symptom of the Universe, that was on Sabotage, for instance. But, yeah, very light kind of production. It's still got some heavy moments on here. Backstreet Kids is one of them. Hell of an opener. I forgot about this track pretty much entirely before this listen, so I was pleasantly surprised to be like, whoa, okay. And, I love the kind of, the chorus going on in here. Pretty cool little melody they got going. Backstreet Kids, hell of a song. Then we get to possibly, it's one of my probably top three on this album. You Won't Change Me, which this really sounds like something that would be off of Blizzard of Oz, Ozzy's first solo album. Really kind of ballady in a way, and just odd the way Ozzy's voice sounds in this, and again the production sounds a lot like Blizzard of Oz, and on this track in particular. But man, what a powerful song! Ozzy talking about that. That the world's not going to change him, nobody's going to change him. He just is who he is, and just really good song. One of my favorites off here for sure, and another one I pretty much forgot about. And another one here, this next one, we actually get the first, we get an instance here with Bill Ward, the drummer, on vocals. And, I gotta say, I am pretty damn impressed. It's real Beatles sounding, and that's one of my favorites off here. It's All Right. And it's just really very kind of happy sounding and Beatles. Like, it sounds like you could put that on a Beatles album, and it would sound, you wouldn't, bat an eye if you thought it was the Beatles, And, it's just such a damn good track, though, yet it does fit with this album somehow. Like, that's the weird thing. This album doesn't really have a consistent tone to it. Just kind of bounces in all these different areas and kind of tackles these different areas the band have been going in. But it somehow makes this really, really cool piece here. And just like with the first two tracks, get the heavier Backstreet Kids, the ballady, You Won't Change Me, and then now with the really Beatles kind of poppy sound in It's All Right. But man, Bill Ward he's a pretty damn good singer, and I think he doesn't really get a lot of credit for that. And because I think he may sing on a song on the next album that of course we'll end up looking at. Then we close off side one with Gypsy, and it's a decent track. Nothing to really write home about. It's a decent track, kind of. I don't know if I'd call it filler, but it's maybe a filler track for me at least. Like, it's just kind of a basic song, while the first three kind of each stood out on their own. This one just kind of blended in, amidst all these kind of crazy, like, whoa, that's different. This one just kind of blended in, but it didn't sound like classic Sabbath either. Because if it did sound like classic Sabbath, it probably wouldn't be filler. But yeah, Gypsy, it's not bad. Just kind of a filler track for me. Then we get on side two. The opener here was one that I did remember and always totally dug. All moving parts, stand still, and man, that's got a killer little bass line, almost like a more than bluesy, almost like in a weird way, like a kind of disco bass line. Not a disco song at all. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying the bass line that Geezer lays down here sounds kind of like it could be a bass line in like a disco track or something, or a funk track. But I just absolutely love that song. That's a top freaking track for me. Oh man, I mean that was, and like I said, that was one I did remember, so I knew going into it. I was like, here we go. Here's now that I've been shot by all those. Here's one that I remembered totally digging, and I dig it more now than I ever did in the past. Then we go on to these next two are also kind of filler ones for me. Here, not bad songs. The Rock and Roll Doctor, it's kind of a weird one, honestly. That's one of the stranger ones off here as far as like, I don't know. It just didn't really work for me. I don't think it's not a bad song, but just a filler one to where I'm like, oh, okay, let's move on. But then you move on to this kind of sappier, She's Gone kind of. I guess it was kind of trying to go for the ballad type thing, and it's got some pretty sad, sorrowful lyrics and stuff going on, and some pretty cool moments in it. But again, not one that I am gonna pop on it. Like if I'm gonna listen to something off this album, not one that I'm probably gonna jump to. Now we close it with the song that I always have remembered off here ever since hearing this album for the first time. And man, oh man, it's just in my eyes, it's actually a Sabbath classic, and always has been for me. Dirty Women. And I mean, it's a pretty lengthy track. It's about 7-something minutes, I believe. And it's got some pretty wild time changes going on. You get the kind of... This one sounds like classic Sabbath, I think, Dirty Women. And I think that's why it's always kind of been a standout for a lot of fans of this album, or people who weren't the biggest fan of this album. They typically will say, well, Dirty Women's a great song. And, man, it's probably the best damn song on here. Out of even those three, or out of the three here, I've been saying are my favorites. But I absolutely love the verses. Again, just kind of a classic Sabbathy riff. But then you get, once the breakdown and really cool time change goes on, you get the Ozzy just going into it and get kind of picking up the pace a little bit, while the other half, was kind of doomy. And Ozzy just is almost like these guttural vocals coming out, I mean, not like a scream or nothing from like death metal, but like he's just more raspier vocals, which is really cool. And man, they just tear it up. And the closing solo, holy hell, man. Iami's just noodling this thing around. It's just, he rips it apart. Hell of a solo. And I might even say that's top tier Tony Iommi solo for me. And I didn't really appreciate or really remember the solo as much as I do now, listening to this album all the way through again. I'm like, man, well, I never really, it never really registered with me how damn good that solo was on that particular song. But yeah, this album, again, very strange one. A lot of people will hate it. Will say it's one of the worst Sabbath ones. I've seen a couple of folks come out and praise it big time. I've seen someone online, Martin Popoff called it his favorite. And I get where that's pretty cool. Like I get where he's coming from. It is a total blend and a really big different one, a different album, for the band. But it does have its kind of filler tracks, and it's weird as far as like tone, and it's not really consistent in its tone. But it's a solid freaking record, and it's one that, especially after this listen, I do have a new respect for and appreciation for. And yeah, we're getting near the end of the 70s here. Next up, we're going to be talking about Never Say Die, the last Sabbath album of the 70s, and the last one to feature Ozzy until, way down the line. And the band was just kind of crumbling at this point here. They were, Ozzy's drug use and all that was just getting way out of control. They even thought about kicking him out at one point, I think after this album, if I'm not mistaken. I know it was some point around in between here and Never Say Die. But man, these guys were just kind of crumbling in a way. And you could kind of hear it, not in a bad way, but like as far as like the direction of this album, it's kind of sporadic and all over the place. But again, I think it makes for a really cool and interesting listen, and it definitely kind of stand out. It's like, oh, that's kind of a weird album. And so, solid album. I respect it and appreciate it a lot more than I ever did, even though I always liked it. But it definitely, totally, it's gotten a lot more re-listens for me, even after listening to it once for this thing. I was like, man, I want to pop on, Dirty Women and Backstreet Kids, You Won't Change Me. Some of those, All Moving Parts Stand Still. I was like, I gotta listen to those again. So it really has registered with me how damn good and this album is, and I would maybe even call it a great album. It's just, it feels good to kind of really get a good feel of how this album is and really appreciate it now. But I'd love to hear you guys' comments on this thing. We've been having some really cool comments and conversations down in the comments about these Sabbath albums as we've been going along here. And some really interesting and cool opinions that that may kind of vary. So I'd love to hear people's thoughts on this one. This one is an outlier in their discography, but damn, it's pretty damn great, So yeah, guys, like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you guys think about this thing, and stay tuned for the final 70s Sabbath album review next time. Never Say Die, and the last one to feature Ozzy before we hit the 80s and go through a big change. With Heaven and Hell. And, it'd be the last one with Ozzy until, 2013, besides, the reunion live album he appeared on or whatever with the bonus tracks. So, this next album coming up is going to be the last time we'll be talking about Ozzy for quite some time. But, thanks again, guys.